this. I'm really fine with it. I think this will pass the subcommittee. I think that the commission itself will, and I spoke a little bit with this with Ms. Lee, is that that's going to be some of the pushback coming from the commission today. And so ultimately, I think it's going to be whether the regional order was written is something that the commission is still comfortable with, and that it is up to city council to make a determination.
Don't touch up
And whether in the letter in which we submitted to city council, we make some mention of that, of the fact that it has gone to the attention of the subcommittee and the commission that the regional order might theoretically be expanding the scope of the use, that it's that we're leaving it up to city council to make a determination whether it's appropriate.
We find it is appropriate, but it's for their final say.
That's right. Does that make sense, Ms. Lee? So that's yeah. One
So
second.
just so you know, the chief made a mention to me yesterday. He's out of town. He made a mention to me, and I didn't have a chance today to look it up. But he said he has some annotated agenda from the council where this claim was only going to be approved for parking. That's
They
not
got tails.
the way it wasn't
Fish.
sure. And so what we need to do is try to find. I'm going to try to find the annotated agenda, but I don't think so. And that was not its sole intent or purpose.
Yeah, I think that the annotated agenda that he brought out was basically saying, I mean, in the beginning of it says, it talks a lot about parking enforcement, but within the body of it, it talks about ALPR data related to specific criminal investigations and things like that. So it was kind of like, well, in the front, it looked like it was just for parking enforcement, but when you read the body of
leads you to believe that it's for more than that. It's for additional criminal investigations. So there was sort of well, it looks like it's just for parking enforcement at the beginning, but if you read the whole thing, you see that they agreed. Whether or not they read it and understood it as it, being broader, we can't say. But when you read the document, it actually reads.
Yeah, so I think
much
that,
more broad.
no, and I agree. I think that the discrepancy here is between what the body of the paperwork that was given to City Council says, vis-a-vis what they actually said at the end. So there's a document
But
that they should have.
They signed off on it.
This is all
right.
political.
No, I know. I'm just saying that we can't really argue about what it meant. It talks about parking enforcement in the beginning, and it talks about criminal investigations in the body of it, and they signed off on it. So I'm just saying, why are we arguing about it now?
Because the community is arguing about it, and ultimately this is a community argument, right? So ultimately, for me, and I think we're in agreement that this is the scope for both criminal investigations under this examples and all these things that we put in place. At the same time, that only for parking enforcement, we believe that they're appropriate and in line. But they're going to say,
Yeah. And we went through this last time where it was like, well, it says this, but they meant that, and whatever. We were going to put it to the city council. I mean, there's no use in us arguing over what the city council agrees.
Sergeant, I need 5 votes of the commission in order to push this to city council. This discussion is because I need to have some kind of conversation and some kind of background when I present this to the commission today, so that I can push it out of the commission.
But I know, I
with
just
that.
feel like we talked about this at the last time. We're having the same conversation.
I know, but during that subcommittee, the last subcommittee, the chief was there. This was brought up, right? City council was not in session.
Right.
I mean, so reaching out to city council to get some questions answered as it relates to that was a little bit difficult. I mean, I could have reached to 4 members of city council and say, was this your intent? I did not, knowing that I probably will get a 50-50 in either side, and that would just mix it more. I think that if there's some sense of that it's not clear, or it is fully indicative, the city council read all the paperwork and that was the final recommendation with that scope in mind, that our job is to say that this is acceptable to us, sell it to the commission that is acceptable to us, and then if there is, maybe the commission will have to put something in front of it saying that we still believe that there might be some gray area here, But I believe, and how I'm going to push it ultimately to the commission, is the city council has to make the final decision on this. This is the review of the work. If members of the commission, and Ms. Lee can please help me here, have any concerns about whether there's a discrepancy in directive, that we can certainly add some language to the letter that when we send this to city council saying, some members have concerns about maybe not it being clear whether the scope could cover this. It's up to city council to make that decision.
Okay,
But as it relates to the general order, we think it works the way it is.
Yeah, and just so you know, so I'm finding 2016 now, there's some reference to January 27, 2015. 2016, this thing gets approved as written, and that's as our department order. That was the original department order, and in that department order, it states it will be used for, at minimum, parking and for locating stolen vehicles. That's in that one.
That was in the consent calendar, right?
Yep. And
So
now I'm
that's,
looking
you see where I'm going, right? So items that are in a consent calendar, and again, for the record, I'm not saying that any member of city council was not thorough in the reading of what it said. I think that sometimes items in the consent calendar can be moved in without looking at so many details. I mean, maybe. We just
we
I'm
can't
just
question
wondering
who
what can
approve
we
it.
do about it here?
But this is the scope in which it's going to happen. We're in favor of this. I'm trying to get ahead of what other conversations are going to happen at the commission today. Hopefully the conversation will not be there. And some of them will be. We'll have public comment, and public comment will probably express that concern. I have to have the answers. So I want to be able to have the answers to say, it seems to me that in 2016 consent calendar item, the city council approved the possibility of the scope encompassing criminal investigations as well. And because of that, we have included language in here which has the immigration policy in place, has training for only people who can use this if they're only trained, and the SCOF law, how it is just a little bit more put together, whatever it is, for us to sell it so we can send it to city council. City council ultimately has to make that decision. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense, but I'm just wondering, what can we do today that we didn't do the last time that we had this discussion?
Well, we had to. Well, we just got this. This was what we didn't get from the chief last time, right?
No,
Well, yeah, he
absolutely
says
not.
the date
He
on it.
pulled that
So the
up.
first one
That's-
was in January 2016, or excuse me, that was 2016, but it refers to January 27th, 2015, where it's on consent. It's on consent, and I'm reading right now what the council approved here on consent, January 27, 2015, and it's talking about it here, and it says.
And you said the other consent item was there with the consent item 2016? What was the date on that consent
Yeah,
item?
that looks like that's an updated, it was an updated, but I'm looking at this. Hold on, now I lost my spot. Talks about the police department using it for parking and investigations.
Let me just add this, 'cause, like Commissioner Perezvelez said, we support it. We support this whether or not the city council's previous resolution restricted it to law enforcement or allowed one. So all we're saying is we did receive the commission's email from Tracy Rosenberg. I don't know if you've seen it. It's in the full packet for the commission for today. And it references a city council meeting on July 11th, 2017, which is actually after that. And it gives a link to it, and it gives some quotes, essentially where it says in the discussion, it says at least the mayor is saying that it was specifically limited to parking enforcement. So I'm not saying that that is or which one controls. I'm just saying, and they're saying in the acquisition of the equipment that those were the statements made by the council. So we're just saying, noting that and saying they need to make the final decision.
And what was the consent item? You said, do you know the date for this consent item in 2016?
Now I gotta go back and look at that one. I'm looking at the one for January 27th, 2015.
So what she's saying is that on July 11th, 2017, this is Tracy Rosenberg, said that city council added a specific directive that the then current usage policy 1-2016 be amended to include the following. And this is supposedly a quote from Mayor Arreguin. Says, what I heard you say, Madam City Manager, is that you would support amending the policy to say the data will not be released or used for law enforcement purposes other than the purposes necessary for parking enforcement until such time as the surveillance policy is implemented. So, in any event, this just raises enough of an issue that we think we should make a note of it. We don't think it should limit or require any change to the policy. We agree with the policy.
Because I think but that quote from the city council is that, I think the quote from the mayor is saying that it can only be used for one thing until this becomes part of the equation. We're offering this as part of the equation. So even this is a good defense for us to say, well, the mayor says that it can only be used for parking enforcement until a general order has been implemented. This is a general order. That might be the intent by the city council to then use it now, expand the scope based on the revision of this general order and everything that's therein. So I mean, it's just, my intention is to push it forward. I cannot dismiss a public comment at this level from somebody who's offering their own background to it, because then part of the equation is to have the answer to the question. So we might have the answer to the question, whether we're happy in 2015, whether it might have happened in 2016 on the consent calendar, 2017. There's a directive city council from the mayor saying, that it would only be used for one thing until a general order for surveillance has been implemented and put in place. If that is the language we're following through, this is it. And we're offering this for the consideration of the commission and to be forwarded to city council at the request of the chief as per the instruction of city council, so they can evaluate it and make their final decision. So I'll sell it as, if you have any problems with anything this is the discussion. I'm not going to gear myself to I'm not going to concentrate the discussion today on whether it's a directive or not. This is what we're proposing as an expansion of the directive. It seems to us that in 2017, that was the only benchmark. You must create a general order before you use it for that purpose, and that's what we are. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm not going to get into the weeds of it, but if the council approves something, right? If they approve something, they vote on it, and then later on the mayor says something in a meeting 2 years later or a year later, to me that's not binding. I mean, call me crazy. I'm not an attorney, but that's not binding. Just because the mayor makes a comment about something.
What's not clear to me, it wasn't just the mayor making a comment, it was in the context of a council meeting, and it seems as though there may have been some discussion about actually having an amendment. So I just read a little snippet of it. I'm not saying that it was amended, but I'm just saying there's enough of an unanswered question for us that we want to flag it for them, and they'll say whatever they did.
Yeah. I think ultimately what we're saying.
Because we're not in a position to know.
Yeah, ultimately what we're saying is that it seems to us that there is this is what they're waiting for in order to expand it. Therefore, we're giving you this, and that's what we're saying.
Yeah. So you get what I'm saying, though, right?
I know.
Council passes something, and then later on, somebody writes a letter about the mayor making a comment about something 2 years later, and during some discussion. But we have no evidence that something was changed or amended or voted upon. We don't operate like that.
Well, I agree with you, but she's given more than that. I haven't bothered to go look at it, but she gave in this letter, she gave a link to a 5-hour meeting that's videotaped with 40 minutes of discussion being about this issue by the council. So it appears to be a city council meeting. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
I don't know. I didn't watch the whole thing, and I don't know what the answer is, but it does seem like it raises the issue. So we're just
Commissioner Calavita will have probably watched all that. So I'm just for the record, right? So I mean, and she's Kate Harrison's appointee, so we may have to make sure we give validity to her arguments, whatever they are, and we put it in the thing here, because the question is just based on that, whether the general order should even have recommendations how to implement a different scope, and we're saying that as a subcommittee, we're saying that we believe that that's a proper use of the ALPRs, that the general order is working appropriately and accurately, the way we think it should go, and that it's up to them. But my job as a chairman is to create a balance and count votes. enforcement is what it is. And city council does the same thing, don't they? They're going any, meeny, miny, moe. Okay, so I think we're comfortable with the changes the chief made, so we're just gonna push it forward to the commission today. They have a copy of this, right, Ms. Lee, with all the changes? I think
Yes, I have copies
And
for
we're gonna,
everybody to pass out.
I'll say, if we need to during the commission meeting, the chief was very responsive to our
Mhm.
recommendations, and not just responsive to our recommendations, to those of Ms. Rosenberg.
Mhm.
Quite frankly, who was president and raised several points. So in terms of, thinking from ground zero what a surveillance policy should be like, this was pretty responsive to public and
Yep.
commission concerns.
That's right. I mean, so, yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have them. I just need to count and counter count. So, Ms. Lee, we're pushing
Okay.
all those. I
Okay.
mean, this is just a revision everything of,
Yeah, this was, and the section I was thinking about was 422.6E, which was what ALPR data not related to specific criminal investigations shall not be released to any local, state, or federal agency or entity without the express written consent of the city, that's not the one. Yeah, but it says, not related to specific criminal investigation. So that basically says, hey, you're only using it for specific criminal investigations unless you get express written consent.
yeah.
To me, that was the statement that essentially limits it.
Catherine's going, what?
No, I get what you're saying.
We agree that this is appropriate.
Yep.
I don't think anybody here disagrees on that. It's just about whether we're flagging an issue that's in the rules or not.
Yeah. I mean, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6. Okay.
Okay.
Let's move on to 349. Tactical Rifle Operator Program, which I believe is the... Did you have a chance to read this?
I'm sorry, which one?
349.
Okay, so these are all policies that are coming back. You've looked at them, you had
Yeah.
questions.
For the shoots and the shells.
Well, there was,
No,
looks like there was other
there
questions. I
was
wasn't
other
at that meeting, so-
questions.
Terry Roberts was asking about why officers would buy their own weapons.
Ah, that's right.
Right.
349.4, and I responded that at some point we didn't have the money to buy officers, so officers were going out and buying their own. This is still an option, but the department has covered the cost most recently, and they're actually supplying officers at the academy with rifles.
You had a question about repairs too, didn't he?
And then he went on to ask modifications.
Right.
How is there accountability for modifications to the owner, to the officer-owned weapons? And I said that the rifles are looked at during training by the firearms instructors and or the armorers, and any modifications will be noted and reviewed for compliance.
Yeah, and I would further add, just like our optional duty pistol program, for example, this pistol I have right here, I purchased. It fits the criteria of the department. Before you can deploy a rifle or an optional duty pistol, it has to meet the criteria. It has to be inspected by one of our departmental armorers to make sure that it conforms and fits within our policy. So it's actually checked out. It's tested, and it's got to meet the department specifications. There's several different, the caliber, the barrel length. There's a whole slew of things, and the rifle is no different. And so it's turned in, it's reviewed, it's gone through, and it's checked to be made, to make sure that it conforms to the policy before it can be deployed.
To include serial number.
Oh yeah, all of
other
that
stuff.
Yeah, all of that stuff is.
How often are they re-reviewed, or are they ever re-reviewed?
We try to have the weapons inspected annually. It doesn't always happen exactly that way because it's pretty complex, and we only have 5 armorers that are experts in this stuff. So they go through, they inspect the springs, and they have parts. They have things in inventory, so they can actually make repairs to the firearms to make sure that they're safe and they're going to work if needed. and then they get cleaned up, they get checked off as basically cleared, and then they get returned to the officer for duty use.
And that was a question by him, that if the weapon is supplied by the department, then the cost of the replacement is carried by the department. If the weapon is individually purchased, then the cost of the repairs, which can only be used through the department repair system, are the responsibility of the person who buys the weapon, right?
For most of it, yeah. There's things like small things like safety stuff, like springs and stuff like that aren't expensive. They have a supply of those that they can use to repair the optional duty pistols as well.
You have anything on
I
that?
have no issues with this whatsoever.
I think we're fine with that one too, Ms. Lee.
Okay, so you're approving that one?
349, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mental illness commitments. It's kind of funny word, right? To me, I would think
is that-
commitments like you're committing. No, it's like it seems to me like you're like a commitment instead of just committing someone.
Yeah, there was a question, the only thing was on the last page. Terry wanted a different word rather than endeavor.
Strive.
Didn't we change it?
We made it to strive, we changed it to
To
strive.
strive.
I can't remember who did it, but I remember. I think you might have done it, yeah. Or maybe you guys did the one that I was doing. Yeah.
Well, it's changed on this copy in the packet, so 410.11,
Mhm.
yeah. So that was the only change on this one.
And there was no general order equivalent of this.
For I-16 was the related.
Okay.
Did you refer to
No,
410 in
you
there?
weren't,
Okay.
this was,
I wasn't
It's
here.
not
you
in
weren't,
there.
you're right, you weren't at this
Can
meeting.
I just ask one quick question? There's a lot of best practice notes I see there for the Lexipol
Mhm.
policies, and were those consistent with our previous general order? There's like 410.67. It's really, I guess it looks like those are the only two that I see like best practices. Oh, and the last one, 11. 6 and 7.
Okay, so, yeah, all of this is, it conforms with what we've been doing.
Okay.
I just have one comment in 410.9, criminal offenses.
Mhm.
I'm not sure it's under F. I'm not sure you need to have the. Complete the police report, any supporting documents that will be needed once the individual is released from psychiatric detention. I don't think you need to say from the psychiatric detention. It's just non-standard English.
The psychiatric facility?
No, it says detention. The
No.
THE. The THE is unnecessary on it's non-standard
Oh,
English.
probably because it used to say police hold.
From the police hold, yeah. But even then, we're from police, yeah. So I think that the is just extra. It,
Once the individual is released from psychiatric detention.
yeah, it just needs psychiatric. It's just non-standard. That's all. I mean, I don't have a problem with this one. I mean, it's
Can
like
we call it approved, or do we have to go over it again at the next one?
no. For that change, that's something you can do yourself.
Did you get it?
Well,
No, I don't think so. I'm lightning quick.
He uses all those nice
I
smelling.
get stuff all the time, but my kids think I'm crazy.
He
They
uses
think
all
I'm
the-
just smacking at something in the air.
He
They
uses-
think I'm 5150. Yeah.
He uses all those Lush cosmetics, so they smell a lot. So they're friggin' Z. No, so do you have any other questions about this one? Easy.
No.
Yeah, I'm fine with the I-16 as well, or 410.
Okay, great. 411, here's a new version.
Cite and release policy.
This is the one you sent me
Yeah,
today?
number 11.
Yeah. So, on what I just passed out, I made notes as to the red lines, because there's, red lines that have not changed, and then there's new red lines, so I took the liberty of highlighting the new ones. You should actually look and see. So,
Is E not a serious violent felony?
I'm sorry, what?
It's a misdemeanor stalking?
I was looking at,
rape of a spouse?
does rape of a spouse not qualify as a serious or violent felony under Penal Code 1270? I don't know.
That's just,
No.
it
Or is
was a
just
new,
redundant?
Lexipol came out with an update, and for some reason, they made sure to add that. So
Okay.
I'm sure that they have their reasons for somebody.
But these
having
are-
messed with it.
These are a list of disqualifying charges where people shall not be released on
Right.
citation.
I was just wondering if E was redundant of C.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Oh,
Definitely wasn't
okay, and then you were saying this is what Lexipol
Yeah,
issued.
just recently.
So those are the only questions these ones did.
Yeah, so Terry had some questions on 411.
About Sergeant Ross, the officers couldn't read into his
Oh,
citing
right.
release at that incident and had to book him to jail.
Yes.
Roberts wanted to know whether 411 would allow for a citing release and on scene in that type of situation. I wasn't a part of that discussion, but I can tell you right there, it says board still wants to address the above question. I wasn't at the meeting,
we
but
talked about the situation, what was going on. It wasn't reasonable to cite
Cite.
and release them back into
right,
the
an offense likely to occur.
The fray that was happening out
Oh.
front.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, it would be considered an offense likely to continue, so
Mhm.
no, in that case. It's kind of like protesters. You could cite and release, but usually
Right, if somebody
it'd be
comes up and batters you
ridiculous.
and punches you in the face, and we go and we cite and release them right here, and then they come back right back over, they're still mad at you, and they come right over and punch you again. That's what we would call an offense likely to continue.
I have no issues. And the only question I have is one of curiosity more than anything else. Juveniles, is it just that, it essentially says that there's few circumstances in which citation is appropriate. Is that because you're
Right.
supposed to contact the parents? Or?
Yeah, it's just, because everything's handled in juvenile court and things like that, it's usually not appropriate, but actually now they have a juvenile court for marijuana violations.
For like shoplifting?
We wouldn't cite them because it's a criminal offense, and so we couldn't cite them into juvenile court, so we would basically write a notice to appear, which is kind of similar to a citation, but it just says that they have to go to juvenile probation.
Okay.
I'm ignorant about this. It's the California marijuana law, 21 and older. Is that what it is? Okay. Right.
So it used to be smoking, but that got changed. The 308 juvenile smoking is no longer a crime.
So somebody could pass them a joint.
So they, I'm talking more about tobacco.
Oh, understood.
But the cities are relying on the city municipal codes to go after them, but Berkeley doesn't have a municipal code regarding juvenile smoking. So, that's.
And the juvenile age is 21, under 21.
I think for smoking it would be under 18.
18. for smoking,
Tobacco?
for
Tobacco.
for marijuana. Possession, transport, and
I think
sale.
it's 18 for marijuana too, or is it 21 like alcohol?
I think it's 21, but I
Yeah,
can't
so-
say for sure.
Yeah, because this is marijuana violations, possession, transport, or sale. So possession of a joint, then I think you have to be 21 years or older in order to not be. That's what it was says to me. I would assume that you have to be 21 years or older. If not, then possession wouldn't be applicable here,
Okay.
unless it's under 18.
You done with that?
Right, that's mine. I mean, so you wouldn't cite an 18-year-old for smoking a joint, or would you? I mean,
I guess you.
I don't know, what is it depends on if it, location based, right? Because there is the smoking
schools.
ordinance.
Yeah.
Right, there's the smoking ordinance.
But does that specifically exempt juveniles?
No, it doesn't.
No.
So like if they were smoking in a
Whether,
commercial
right.
district, you could cite them, but just if they were
or within 20
bebopping
feet
down
of
the
a,
street smoking a cigarette, you couldn't.
But this is a criminal citation. So I'm just want clarity in, because recreational marijuana is legal in the state of California. What's the cutoff? Is it 18? Is it
That's what I'm
19?
looking
Is it
for.
20? Yeah.
I think it's
mean,
21, but
It is. It might be 21. I mean.
So you're saying you want a caveat that talks about the people between 18 and 21 that
No,
they
you guys,
can
you
get a
guys,
ticket.
you guys know. I mean, if the police officers know that if the caveat is 18 years old and the person's 17, that's criminal. That might be a criminal juvenile violation for possession, transport, or sales. But for possession, somebody who falls under the spectrum of the age which is approved by in California, then it's not a misdemeanor. It's not a
Right,
criminal
but
violation.
it's getting cited into traffic court, basically. So if you're citing a 16-year-old, it'd be the same violation.
here we go, recreational usage in Prop 64 in 2016, recreational usage of marijuana became legal under 64 immediately upon certification. Adults aged 21 or older
There you go.
are
That's
allowed
right.
to possess,
right.
transport,
That's
blah,
right.
blah, blah, blah,
So
blah, possess.
that's it. That's a cutoff date. Yeah, I have no questions on 411.
And it says, you may not smoke it where tobacco is prohibited.
Yep. Which
So
makes
that-
that's everywhere. Thank God. Well, I'm not a smoker, so keep that stuff away from me. Is what I say.
Okay,
So we're
so you're
calling
approved
411.
We
on
are
411?
we are moving from 411. Yes, ma'am.
To 419 for the
Field training officer program.
So Terry had some questions about the FTO program.
Oh, Miss good old Terry.
Asking why we changed the
What?
from 4 years
To three, yeah.
years for minimum patrol experience, and I just said that we found that officers with as little as 3 years of experience. I became an FTO with 3 years of experience, and it just.
But weren't you a savant?
I was a savant.
Well,
So, I mean,
not
it-
Well,
necessarily.
we also have laterals that come
Yeah.
from other agencies
That's right.
Yeah, so
that
there's
might
that
have
too.
16 years and FTO experience
Right.
there, so you don't want to prohibit
See,
them.
that makes more sense
Yeah.
Yeah.
than the savant idea.
Yeah.
Somebody who's been 12 years in the department, spends 2 in this years in this department, has 14 years under their belt. That would make a lot of sense to have that person with FTO if they're
For
trained.
example, yeah, we just hired a guy from San Rafael, had 16 years experience, he'd been an FTO for 10 years over there. If, we shouldn't prohibit him to have to be here for 4 years before he can train.
Oh, that reminds me, I had to ask you a question about something.
Okay.
It just
And
perked my
then
interest.
Terry had a question about the deleting the pass in an oral interview, and I said because we don't give points or a pass-fail grade, so,
How do you grade them? It's on a scale of a number? You must
No.
pass a minimum number?
no, I mean, you can't fail an interview, you can do really poorly in an interview, but you can't fail an interview.
But interviews that I've done for other departments, we grade them on a scale of
That's a promotion.
Two.
Yeah, this is just for.
professionals to the FTO.
Yeah.
This is not so it's
It's
either.
not like a hiring where we say, oh, we'd recommend that this person move on, or we don't recommend. It's just either they did well or they didn't, so we just removed the word pass from the policy.
They basically get ranked.
Yeah, it's a scope of
They
competency.
get ranked,
Yeah.
yeah, and basically
That makes
based
sense.
on how they answer. The panels you've been on were promotional and had to have a scoring value, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, the FTO FTO evaluations that I made in all the departments are based on a scope, right? A scope of competence. How competent is this person on this field?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that's graded differently. I mean, it's not a pass or a fail. It's a curve scale, so to speak.
And then George was asking about the types of allegations that impugn the integrity of the program or the member's service. Does it have to be a sustained allegation? I stated that I think that it would need to be sustained, or the officer would have a grievance, because technically they'd be being penalized.
My question was based on whether a police officer could be removed from the department if the allegation had not been proven, which
Right.
I thought that was unfair. Okay.
No, yeah.
Yeah, just because somebody has
I
an.
think they would have a grievance if it wasn't.
Yeah, because
if it
I thought the
was
way.
unsustained and they got taken out of the program. for
I
that.
thought the way it read to me was like just the allegation of misconduct would be enough to remove the person from the program. So it has to be a sustained violation.
Yeah.
But are there any
It's
instances?
clear under Peace Officer Bill of Rights on that. That would
But
be-
are there any
it's a-
well, sure, but there should be an internal process in which you have forewarning, pretty much somebody who has allegations against them based on one thing. I mean,
Well, sure. I mean,
Early
that-
warning
that would-
system,
yeah,
right?
That'd be, and our blue team and all that, that would be in there. But once
Yep.
again, if something's not sustained,
Yeah.
discipline isn't issued, you can't,
yeah.
and therefore discipline them by removing them or not selecting them to that position.
Yeah. It wasn't clear to me.
That would be considered a form of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. If 20 people complain about how you handle something, but body worn camera evidence and an investigation dictate that you didn't do anything wrong,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. I mean, you would come back and say, how can you reprimand me or discipline me for accusations that were not sustained?
Yeah, it wasn't clear to me. I wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that was the case, that it was only sustained, not just the allegation of something, because that's okay. Police officers following feet for 20 foot pursuits.
Okay, so we're approving field training.
We are applying for training. I'm assuming the silence to the left means there's no concern.
I'm good on field training.
Foot pursuits.
For 20.3.
So, yeah, for 20.3, you guys thought that the first should be a shall.
I think I disagreed.
And
Or I agreed, but I
you-
changed it.
Yeah, we changed the first should to a shall, and then you both, you were both okay with the second should. Yeah, so we changed it to a shall.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was a should on the first paragraph, the safety of department, and the other should that we said we were okay with if circumstances permit.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted the first paragraph to be a shall, public safety, and then the other one, the nature of the foot pursuit is something that,
So
it
I wasn't
changes.
in that discussion, Sam. No, I wasn't there that night. I was attending something else for the chief, and so yeah, Sam sent that to me. I agreed. I changed it to shall, but added some language in there also, because yes, you're right. But there's situations I can't remember exactly what I wrote.
Depending on
Yeah,
the
so we
series.
added-
Yeah, the seriousness of it, or what. How dangerous is this person that if we just stop chasing them, they're going to go in and run into somebody's house and commit a violent felony, right? The danger that they pose, the immediate danger that they pose to the community.
I think you added one of the primary considerations opposed to the primary consideration.
It still has a discretionary aspect to it in the top and the bottom. I think that we were thinking somehow that whether a police officer it's obligated to automatically do so, and by doing this we're saying, what is the safety of the police officer and the members of the public, we're making this determination. The end, what you added at the bottom I think it's fine by me, because it makes common sense. It's just that a lot of these general orders are read by the public, so I mean, this adds just a little bit to what it to say, oh, they're thinking about it before doing it, even the discretion is not taken away by the police officer, which is not. I mean, it's just that extra level of comfortability. And also knowing the police officer has options, right? Oh, I have to pursue it. That's a directive. I have to pursue it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's not what the person should do at this time. But then they should at the bottom saying, you know, I mean, the police officer has to make the determination whether there's other alternatives or not. And that goes to your first statement. The priorities to apprehend somebody could create bigger harm.
Yeah, if we were to let the person go. And I kind of modeled that on some of the language from our pursuit policy. You have to weigh the benefit of apprehension, or between benefit of apprehension versus danger to the public.
I have one question. Sorry, I wasn't here before, but under 420.3, I'm kind of questions about C through E. Because if circumstances permit, surveillance and containment are generally the safest tactics for apprehending fleeing persons. This is on the bottom of the first page, you see that? And then it says, deciding whether to initiate or continue a foot pursuit, an officer should consider reasonable alternatives to a foot pursuit based upon the circumstances and resources available. Then it has a canine. And I thought we had a limitation on canine.
We do, but once again, under certain circumstances, we can use canines. So if it were, for example, if it was a serious violent felony, somebody just shot somebody, and they ran into a certain, a contained area, then
Use one today.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So then also that's the same for
Also
air support.
hostage and
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's just a factor. And then what we would have to do is if we were
I
going
guess
to decide.
determination is that reasonable or not, given the circumstances?
Yeah, so we're exactly, and once we got to that idea, a dog or a canine would be great right now, but then we'd have to consider the canine policy, and does it meet? Can we actually
is it
use a
reasonable?
canine
Is it reasonable?
in this situation?
and the same falls on the air
with
support.
Yeah, same thing.
All right, that's my only question.
So I think we're fine with that one too, with 420.
I had another one.
That's
420.
You're gonna want to write something.
424.
MDT use. Asking what it means to secure the MDT, locking the vehicle should be considered securing. And then it says in 424.5, they would like to understand why B uses should and C uses shall. And sorry, so B
Yeah.
uses should and C uses shall. And I just basically said, I think it's because they were talking about the dispatcher in B, and there's a chance that they might miss it or hear it and not put it in the notes. But when it's one of us, the member, has to put it out on the air via voice so everyone knows where he or she is. Whether or not the dispatcher enters it is another story. But if the officer decides to go look at an abandoned car, they don't have to put it out verbally, but they shall put it out on the MDT so their location is known. Does that make sense?
Does that make sense?
It does.
I mean,
Yeah, there's very few incidences where an officer is going to put themselves out on a self-initiated something. In fact, I think we have prohibitions to several things like a car stop. You can't put yourself out. It's a safety issue.
Yeah.
You need to put a car stop out over the radio so that if you guys are working somewhere else in the city and I make a car stop, you need to hear it over the radio. You need to hear me say what it is, where it is. And so that you have that, in your head, as opposed to if I just go and put it on the computer and you're driving around, and then if something happens,
then nobody's gonna know.
you don't know where I am.
So, but in B, when they're saying whenever activity or contact is initiated by voice, it should be documented by a dispatcher. So it's just saying it should be documented. Dispatcher should put everything in the call, everything that we say, but they don't.
That's why we have a
So,
recording.
Yeah, they don't put everything in there. But this is basically saying when an officer is doing some sort of activity or contact, and they choose not to do it by voice, they shall put it in the call so that we at the very least know their location. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see the difference.
Yeah, that's also some ways, so, yeah.
That was kind of like a silly question, but it's fine. Yesterday, we don't have any other questions on 424.
Okay, so you're good with that?
Yes, I am.
And we go to Terry's disabled vehicles.
Oh, I cannot
You
believe
love this
it.
one. Come on, this is
Of all the
this is the
GOs,
one.
of all the policies I
This
thought would
is
not
the
be an
one.
issue.
This is the one that we like.
He wanted changing the first should to a shall in 506.2. He wants this changed to shall make a reasonable effort to provide assistance.
Yeah, and we
And
talked
we
about
went over
Yes, we talked. I remember this one.
Ad nauseam.
Yeah, ad nauseum, and I said absolutely not
Yeah.
because, and I used the example of an officer driving by somebody, a person and their child that's disabled vehicle, while at the same time they're responding to a shooting. It's a prioritization, life prioritization. We're not going to make that a shall.
That's why it's a should.
But I thought that I saw that post training when for police departments, that kind of a question scenario is a win either way you answer it. Police officer answers on the radio. There are 3 calls that come in. 1 call is for a drowning child. 1 call is for
Right.
an answer to an alarm system. 1 call is for assistance to another police officer. There's no wrong answer to this question. It's how you prioritize it and whether you have a reason to prioritize it that way that is important when you're getting evaluated as a police officer. I went to the post-training commission training for this, so I know this is a true fact, right? I'm going to prioritize the child being drowning because it's a loss of life. I mean, if it's the alarm system can be there. It could be something that is triggered differently, and the response to assistance to another police officer could be different levels of assistance. I can reverse it and say call for assistance to a police officer is my first only priority. Maybe medical attention is coming to the police to the person with the child, so sometimes medical assistance will be there. EMTs, nothing else that I can do there.
Depends
Alarm,
on, yeah.
That's right. So I think that Terry's interpretation of this is based maybe on that dynamic, that regardless of the argument that you have, well, responding to a call or not, that the spectrum is shots have been fired, right? Officer down. That would be the extremist to this kind of evaluation, but that a police officer should or shall, to me, I'm just going to give you the version of why I looked at it differently than he did, but I thought that even in the case of those 3 instances, a police officer could determine that that's the first priority to stop, make sure that they get the right kind of assistance. And it wouldn't be in violation of any other call that he or she is responding to.
Right. It would be based on the facts that you know at that time, right? Like the child drowning, yeah, absolutely. I think any one of us, that's going to be the number 1 priority, unless I know that there's an ambulance that's 2 blocks away from it, and I'm halfway across the city. Then maybe I'm not going to respond immediately. Then maybe I'm going to, change my prioritization. But as presented, without any other facts, the child drowning, I think any one of us that's going to be the priority.
But to twist it around, I mean, shouldn't they just make sense to say if that officer is assigned to a call of higher priority, the dispatcher shall be advised of the location of the disabled vehicle and the need for assistance. Shouldn't then twist it if the other one is a should, because we understand that discretion, its officer has to make that determination. But if the officer sees some person who's in distress and responding to a higher priority call, shouldn't be the responsibility of the police officer, shouldn't be that be a shall for the police officer to inform the dispatcher of the location of that person? Or is that so fluid, so fast that no, there's even chance for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think once again, if you start locking an officer into a shall, one, the officer might not have seen them, right, when they went by. Like, so somebody could say, well, I saw the officer and he looked right at me, but he had his lights and siren on. He went right by me, right? It doesn't mean that the officer saw them, and it might not. It might mean too. You know, I could.
But this says observes.
What's that?
This particularly uses the verb observes, which means that it was an evaluation of the police officer, so this taking place. So the determination is whether the police officer is obligated to stop, or whether the police officer is obligated to make sure somebody knows the person is in the possible distress.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference that I see, which is not that Terry saw. I mean, and the question is whether.
Well, it goes back to the should and the definition of should, and it's like, what's the definition of should again that we use?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
fair and reasonable, negligent.
I mean, it gets down, the should versus shall thing, I get it, but on this one, we argued this to the end on the first round, you know, this was 7 rounds ago.
In February.
In February, and I was like, I was digging my heels in because I don't want to lock an officer into having to stop for somebody with a disabled vehicle. And I think should suffices in terms of, we should try to help them out if we can, if possible.
So let me ask you a question, because that comes to our understanding. What is the conversations that you're having as police officers? This whole very, very nuanced and broad and very specific and clear explanation that you folks gave to me, is that the kind of explanation that when you're interacting with a police officer and FTO, is this what you say to them? You know, this is a nuance here, this is the variation here. Is this a conversation you have with a police officer when you're talking to them through your disabled vehicles policy? Or is there an assumption somewhere?
Well, I
that
mean,
they understood?
you go through policies. I mean, you go through policies with them. And I mean, I think where we work is so gray. Everything. I mean, the very little is black and white. And so, we try to teach them, you know, life, property, maintain order. I mean, in that order. You know, so life safety is the number 1 priority. Property is second, and maintaining order is third. And if I'm responding to a life emergency, and I see somebody with a disabled vehicle, I might want to stop and help them. But is that the most appropriate thing?
Well, that's good for you to hear. I think to hear because 50 years ago that was reversed. It was order first. It was property second. That was one of the major failings of the LA Police Department, right? But again, not California, right? Biggest police, biggest. Well, no. But I mean, but that failure, but
You're like in the weeds in another state right now.
No. But the reason why LA failed at that created some of the changes that posed training for any other department in the state of California. So any time that the police department in the state of California fails to do something correctly, the assumption is not that every single department in the United States does it right correctly, or even California itself. So for a very long time, I don't know, you weren't in the police department 50 years ago in Berkeley. I mean, but the directive by the Department of Justice and every single police department was order first. Maintain order. Sanctity of life was not the first choice, or it doesn't call it sanctity of life, just make sure public safety and life preservation was not the first choice. 30 years ago or 40 years ago in any department in California, to include Berkeley. But I'm okay with 506. Okay? Now that Terry's not here going, well, I still don't like it.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Well, I hope there's no life-saving emergency at his house, and I'm driving to, and there's a disabled.
He's a wonderful.
And he wonders why.
Maybe he's thinking he's disabled on the side of the road, and he just wants that help.
I really care about you, but I'm going to stop and change his tire. Sorry.
So I think we have time for. Do we have time for? We do have 15 for 20. What? 15 more minutes for 421.
Oh, 421. Okay.
Contacts and temporary detentions. 421. Terry. Well, he's in Walnut Creek now, so he's the Berkeley Police, the Walnut Creek Police Department is their responsibility now.
What was the other call?
It was R29, it was about like putting FI cards on the briefing table. So we didn't take anything from there.
Yeah, this is a big one, because this goes to the matter of improper detention, proper detention, lawful detentions. This is not an easy general order. Are you ready to discuss this one? You're not. I'm not. I'm not ready to discuss 421. That's my bad. We can postpone that one. This
Okay.
is a bigger conversation than just 15 minutes, maybe. Okay.
You don't have to, you have like 10.
Yeah. I mean, I think I did not read it, so
Okay.
I have not given it the importance that it requires. So we're gonna bypass 421 until the next meeting. Terry and I are not. Terry. Easy.
Moving on up.
Easy.
Associated with Terry.
Easy and I did not read the general order. We did not do our due diligence, or at least I did not, to be ready to have a discussion which is worthy of your time and attention.
So we'll go over 421 next time?
Yeah, but we did everything else.
What else?
Okay,
What else is there?
well.
Then we have a
Probably
bunch.
some new, well, you know what, there are some.
Some are coming back, right?
There are some that, let's see. So there's media relations and.
Which were on
The
hold
reason
for the
there's a-
chief, right?
No, there's a question about that because
It was about the credential.
it was about credentialing, and now you're not doing
We're
credentialing.
not doing it, and that was their point, was that they wanted us to start doing media credentials, and when I put it to our PIO and our Community Services Bureau, they gave it a big red X and said, we will show up at
It's-
the PRC meeting and explain why this is not an option. So,
I'm not even
So there's
in
that
meeting, I
one,
can tell you that.
and then, First Amendment assemblies, There-
that's our old C.
64.
Old C-64.
Yeah.
and you guys said you had some concerns, but it's not clear to me what they were. This is before I was sitting in your meetings, so you need to, I
Yeah,
think
there
I
was
need to.
Do we need to go back to that?
The PRC had a full subcommittee on C-64, so I feel like.
That was approved after like months of
Right.
subcommittee meeting. Mike
And-
Durbin was on that, and
Right.
I know that if we were gonna go revisit that yet again, Mike was gonna come in and talk about all the stuff that he recalled.
I don't remember whether, we have done so many other ones. We have done like 60 ahead of those,
There
so
was
I don't remember.
Yeah, there was a subcommittee formed.
Oh, yeah.
Just for that particular GO.
Right, and it looks like you just you didn't make any changes, it just got carried over.
Yeah.
Okay,
So we might just have to look at it again and see, there's nothing here.
Yeah,
I have
if there's any
no
issues,
recollection of
yeah,
this
we're
at
gonna
all.
bring Mike back, and Mike's gonna have to.
My memory is good, but I have no recollection of it. I'm like in the Hobbits, when they're in the ruins of Mordor. So I have no recollection of this place.
In fact,
Well, the
when I
air
brought
seems
up-
to be blowing from here.
In a discussion, when I brought up something about the C-64 and the new Lexipol policy, Mike immediately, his blood pressure went up because he said, I spent months on that,
Oh.
working with the
303, control devices and techniques, and 304, conducted energy device, also known as tasers. 303, I gotta do some research on that, because I think it went to the commission, and somebody, I think it was Sahana raised, because it has to do with tear gas and pepper spray, and then there were all these policies that
Yeah, well, the control
council,
yeah.
that the council passed some policies last year.
Yeah, about tear gas.
Yeah, and pepper spray.
And pepper spray.
And pepper
Yeah, and
allowing it for.
and I think that it
carpet
wasn't, somebody raised that it wasn't properly reflected in in the new policy, in the Lexipol, so I haven't gone back and looked at that. but
Yeah, I guess
That's what I would
it
do.
would be good to just, we could re-review 303
Right,
and
and
304. Cause.
Yeah, 304 to me was like, what are we talking about this? Why
yeah,
is this
to
a general order?
formulate questions for those.
Yeah,
Right.
304,
So that-
yeah.
That's the update
Yeah,
if you want.
304 to me was like, what are we talking about this? I mean, it's like, is this, why is this in front of us as a possible general order? With,
But I mean, is it a question that we can answer here, or is it a question for the chief?
it's a question for the chief, I mean, because the chief needs to talk to us why the conductive energy equipment is something that
device.
we're discussing. I mean, it's like, I mean, if 304 is a conversation, a policy conversation, that's gonna have to go to the commission as a subcommittee conversation. We don't have a directive for the city council that to have a discussion on possible usage of tasers, even if they're just indirectly approving that someone comes in from another department and uses them. I mean, we have no directive. I mean, I'm just a little bit hesitant to engage in a conversation which we, according to the powers that be, no one wants to have. So we'll need to hear from the chief why it is permissible, would be permissible, for someone to come in from a department upon the request of the Berkeley Police Department, because if I remember the general order correctly, for the usage of that in an individual which is ill intention or possible arrest within the city of Berkeley. That's a much bigger conversation. I'm not, it's not a question whether members of the commission are in favor of city council of the use of tasers or not. It's indirectly allowing for the usage in Berkeley, and I need to figure out
Okay,
how
so is
people feel
that
about
a
that.
Lexipol subcommittee topic, or?
We have to hear from the chief. I mean, why is that 304 in front of us, which hasn't been present before?
Do you want to ask them at Lexipol, or do you want to ask them in the full commission?
What do you think, Easy? It's a hot potato either way. We can certainly ask the chief why is Lexipol policy 304 relevant?
Yeah.
Why is it that we should be discussing it? And then have him answer.
Yeah,
I
but
mean-
in what forum? That's my
Subcommittee.
question.
Well, before
It's-
I'm not willing to consider policy 304 at the Lexipol level until we hear from the department why it is relevant for us to discuss it.
Yep, okay.
So, yeah, ask again, maybe I'm
Whatever's
misunderstanding.
easiest, Ron.
Right, when you say hear from the department, you're talking about hearing from the department at a meeting, right?
Yeah,
Or
I'm
you-
asking for the chief directly.
Okay, right, do you want to ask the chief at a Lexipol subcommittee meeting, or at a full commission meeting?
I think it would be better to start a Lexipol meeting.
Okay, okay,
Yeah, I that's my hesitation, is I don't want to have this. Are we always still recording?
Are you done?
Are we done?
Okay.
Yeah.